Good morning and welcome to the Point. Well, it has been a busy few weeks in Lansing. The budgets are done. There is other legislation we'll talk about later in this show. But first, let's talk about one of the most important budget items for most people, and that's K through 12 education. We do that with the man in charge of that budget in the Senate, Senator Jeff Hansen. Senator, let's start talking about the one issue that I probably hear more about year in, year out, and that's K through 12, school aid fund. That's your budget over in the Senate. That is one of the most complex budgets to deal with. For a long time, it was the largest standalone. We were just talking. It's no longer. It's Health and Human Services. It's about $10 billion bigger now, right?
It is now, but you know, the school aid fund is almost $14 billion up to that about this year. And I'm very proud of the budget we put out this year because it makes a huge difference on what's happening in our schools. You know, first of all, we're looking at the lower funded schools are going to get $140 a student increase, which is a pretty good increase. The higher funded schools will get $70. It's called the 2X formula. We do that so that we can bring our lower funded schools up towards our higher funded schools so that we can get them evened out. I think it's a great opportunity for us, and there's so much in this. You know, we had some focuses this year that I thought were very important. The K3 or early literacy, K3 reading, trying to make sure that our kids can read when they get to third grade, because that is the building blocks of all education. Because once they get past third grade, I mean, they say that kindergarten to 3, they're learning to read, and then from third grade on, fourth grade on, they're reading to learn. And if we want them to be successful, we have to make sure that they know how to read when they get to third grade.
I want to come back and talk a lot more about that because I was at that event with the governor, and you were on that committee as the guy who was kind of helping shepherd through this bipartisan approach, because there were Republicans and Democrats and all kinds of folks that were looking at people from the business sector. I know John Kennedy, I think, chaired the committee from here in Grand Rapids. And so that was a big look. But I want to go back because I don't want to get too far afield yet until we talk about this budget a little bit. Because one of the things that people talk about, we know in the last election cycle for governor, it was a big conversation. Was there more money or was there less money in schools? And you can look pretty easily, if you go to Senate Fiscal or House Fiscal, you can see the growth of the school aid fund over the course of the years. But the way the money has been put into the schools has changed a little bit since this governor took over, partially to deal with long-term debt for retirement and that type of thing. So explain to me a little bit how that works, because I think people are a little confused. You're talking about per pupil funding actually going up for many schools. Well, actually for all schools. Even at the very highest level, it goes up even a small amount, $25.
Right.
But, but the idea is that there are costs other than just today's teachers. There are teachers that have already retired and those who will retire, and those are unfunded liabilities.
Yeah, we do have legacy costs. We have teachers that have retired, and we have to, you know, it's our promise to them that we pay to make sure that they get their retirement. And so this year, it was almost $1 billion that we put into paying our long-term liabilities for that retirement. And we've been doing that for the last 3 or 4 years, and it's been going up. And we're going to be doing that through 2037. That's the time where we get to the point where we've paid our long-term liabilities. And we need to make sure we keep doing that, because that's a huge drain. I mean, it's one of those things that we pay it rather than sending it out to the schools, because they could have $600 or $700 a student more right now. But if we send it out to them, they would just have to turn around and send it back to us for the payment for their retirement. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to hold them to 20%, 20.46 or something like that percent, so that we can make sure that number one is they know what their cost is going to be, because it's fluctuated, it's been going up, but we set it at a certain amount and we're going to leave it right there so they know what their costs are going to be. And then the $140 I'm talking about is on top of that. So it's a decent increase. There's some other things in here. I know I talked a little bit about K3 reading. You know, we're putting $31.5 million into early literacy initiatives that we're doing here. One of the things that I'm really proud of is we're able to put more money into added instructional time so that they can hire people. And what I would love to have them be able to do is hire some of our retired teachers to come back and be literacy specialists to help these kids in kindergarten through 3rd grade with their reading and making sure that they're getting what they need. They're already trained, it's been their life work. I don't have a problem with them coming back to help out with that, and I think they can do it, you know, quite reasonably, and the schools are excited about that. We also have some literacy coach money, which means that we're going to have a coach that will be at an ISD that will be able to come around and help the teachers to make sure that they're using the techniques and things that they need to know. Make sure they know everything that they need to know. Give them the tools, and they'll be successful. Trying to work with the parents. We're working on a model that we're using. Minnesota has a model that they use, that they bring, or they work with the parents to make sure that they understand what their kids need. And because that's one of the issues, is trying to make sure the parents understand how to support their children into school. So it's you know, there's so much, and I'd like to talk about one of the other things, you know, because that I'm particularly excited about, because career tech is one of the things that we've talked about. Mm-hmm. The governor talks about it. I'm a big supporter. I think that by putting some more money, I put $10 million more into our career tech for added costs. So that means that they can make sure they have the welder that they need, the CNC machine. It means they're going to be able to have the HVAC equipment that they need, so that the kids can get a skill that they'll need, because the jobs are out there if they can have a skill. But on top of this, I put a little more money into our adult education, because I want our adult education to be able to use our career tech centers after hours, because I'm trying to get to the point where the adult education helps them with a skill that they can get a job with. I mean, a GED is one thing, but then they have to go to the next step. I want them to be able to get a skill that they can utilize, because I think it's 96% of the kids that go through career tech use what they've learned in career tech in their adult professional life.
You talked about several important things. I want to go back to one of them, and that is getting parents involved. And this goes to the early childhood education. This is an area where you and the legislature have been putting more money in on a yearly basis, and you said another big chunk this year. But you also served on this committee with John Kennedy, with your counterpart on the budget committee over in the Senate from the Senate Democrats, as well as Republicans and Democrats from the House and others. And you came up with this idea of how to make sure that kids can read by the 3rd grade. And there's 2 issues I want to touch on. One is, we heard about the legislation, the conversation that if you can't read at a certain level by 3rd grade, you're going to be held back. That option still exists out there, but what this work group has done and recommended is that you put all of these tools, the coaches, extra classroom time for reading comprehension, all of those things in first, starting at kindergarten, so you don't have to get to that point. But one of the other things, and Teresa Weatherall-Neal, the superintendent of schools in Grand Rapids, was talking about the adult academy that they have here, and sometimes actually getting parents in and helping them with their reading skills so they can help their kids. So once again, something to get parents involved, which seems vitally important to get this done.
Well, that's hugely important, because the parents are the first teachers. And we need to make sure that they understand, you know, like I said before, is what their kids need to be successful. But sometimes the parents need some help. You know, and my hat's off to Teresa, because she has done a great job with Grand Rapids Public Schools. I've been through the schools, and I've met with her a couple of times, and she is just a firecracker, because she really gets at it. She is kind of exactly what we need in a lot of our schools. Is we need a strong leader that can go out and get everybody to get on the same page and pull in the same direction. And as we had schools that are successful come in to see us in the early literacy committee that I was on, we found that everyone that was successful had a strong leader. They used a lot of data, understanding where their kids are, and teaching their teachers how to use the data to get the kids to where they want them to go. And the successful ones, it was always that strong leader. It was always using this data. But to get that data, they've been taking interim tests, and they do 3, 4 a year, so they can figure out exactly where they're at. And I actually put $4 million in this year for that interim test to help the schools with paying for that, because that was part of every successful program that we talked to about that. And just, you know, it's about attitude and making sure that everybody is on the same page in the schools. And you know, we have wonderful teachers. We really do in the state of Michigan. And if we give them the tools and we give them the guidance and we give them the leader, then we're going to be very successful. We can't have Michigan not be successful.
And that early childhood literacy is such an important part of that. The governor spoke about it very passionately. Obviously, he's very passionate about education, but he also revealed during that talk that he himself, a guy who graduated high school and college almost simultaneously, talked about he himself had trouble with certain aspects of learning, and that's why he thinks it's so important that you institute these things, the coaching for teachers, coaching for parents, and getting everybody involved. But you also talked about another separate but equally important thing that the governor also talks about very often, and that is that career technical education, because right now, by some estimates, there are 90 to 110,000 jobs in the state of Michigan that are jobs that would pay well, that people can make careers out of if they had the training to take that job, but they don't have. And so Mike Rowe from Dirty Jobs was up at Mackinac Island during the Detroit Regional Chamber. In fact, I was supposed to host that particular panel with them, and I got another interview I had to do here. I was sorry I missed it, but I got to read a lot of the excerpts, and the whole idea is that we as a society have to start looking at that career technical opportunity as something that's viable for some kids, because not all kids are going to go to four-year colleges, and not all of those type of jobs require that, and you have put more money back in for that too.
Absolutely. And you know, part of it isn't just that they're not going to go to a four-year university, but it's a different type of thinking. You know, you have to deduce things, you have to make things work, and so it actually helps you with everything that you do from then on also. And we have to elevate the importance of it. It's been kind of played down that if they're not going to college, then they should go to the career tech. But you know, I see it as a wonderful opportunity for people, because there's so much that you can do through that, and you get a different outlook on life. You may find what you want to do, or sometimes you find what you don't want to do by going out and doing it. And so I think it's so important. Both of my kids went through. My youngest went through the police training. My oldest one, be a welder. He told me in 8th grade he wanted to be a welder. And it's like, oh, really? You know, and well, come to find out.
But that is kind of the attitude that some parents have.
But that's exactly right. So I understand it.
Yeah.
But then at the end of the day, when he took a military aptitude test, and the guy says, well, your son would make a great welder. I go, oh, really? And he goes, you realize that they start at $48,000 a year.
Up to $85,000.
And this was back in 2000,
right.
you know, and I'm going, he'd be a great welder.
Well, and the one other aspect of that, and I think here in Michigan we suffer from it, and it's not irrational, but we have seen some of those high-tech career jobs in our manufacturing operations and elsewhere kind of come and go with the roller coaster economy. And so I think some people have been afraid to say, yeah, it's okay, but you go into these manufacturing places today and they're cleaner than the studio.
Oh, yeah.
And we know that particularly in the autos, that they've had to get smarter about what they do because they've certainly seen some hard times. So one of the things, again, Mike Rowe was talking about, one of the things I think that you're talking about, is we have to have a different mindset when it comes to those jobs, because A, they can be careers, and B, it may not take you as long to get there, and C, there are a lot of openings right now.
Oh, as I have been around my district, because in the last 4 years I've been to over 110 of my manufacturers and businesses, and I'm hearing the same thing, is we need people. We need people, and we'll train them, you know, but there's 4 things. As I talk to kids, I talk to them about the 4 things, you know, because soft skills are so important too. When I was at Orchard View, I was talking to a kid, or to a group of kids, and I said, all right, well, let's start with this. So I picked a kid right in front. He says, what time did you come to school? He says, I came at 7:30. I says, nice. That's really good that you came at 7:30. He says, were you on time? No. I says, well, number 1, show up on time. He says, number 2, every day. Number 3, be the best at whatever you do, because if you don't like the job, you can work your way out. But if you don't do your best, you probably can't get another job because they're not going to give you a good reference. And number 4 is, you know, it's all about the individuals. You have to pass a drug test. And if you do those 4 things, the business will fight to keep you.
Senator, we talked about this just before we started that our time goes by so quickly, and it has gone by. I want you to come back in a few weeks. These budgets are already passed, I should point out. But I'd like to explore this a little bit further, because when you talk about the education opportunities, we've talked about the K through 3 opportunities all the way to adult education. There are a lot of gaps to fill in there. I hope you'll come back and talk about it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
There is more to talk about when it comes to education, and in a future show we'll do that. But when we come back, a new piece of legislation has been introduced again. This time it deals with lighting up in the car. That's next. To the Point. Welcome back to the Point. Representative Sam Singh is a Democrat from East Lansing, and for the second time, he's introduced a bill that says you cannot smoke in your own car if you have minors in that car with you. We talked to him about that. Representative, this is not the first time you've introduced this legislation, and it's not the first time you've heard some of the arguments against it. But first, explain to me what it is that you would hope to achieve by this legislation that you've introduced.
Well, I've introduced legislation both last term and this term to make it a prohibition to smoke in a car when children are present. Right now, I've seen a number of the research reports that have been done that show very convincingly that even with a window cracked down in a car, children are impacted by that secondhand smoke. And because of their size of their bodies and their lungs and their capacity, that impact is even much more significant. And I felt that that was a safety risk, and obviously most parents already are not doing that, and so I figured this was an opportunity and time for us to introduce a bill that would prohibit that. There's about 5 to 6 other states that have already done this, so this is not something new, but it is something I wanted to make sure that we protected the rights as well as the health of those children.
One of the reasons that we're sitting here today is that I posted on social media when this bill went in. Actually, you had a post on Facebook and I saw it and I said, well, I'll put this up. This is interesting. And then I just left it alone.
Sure.
And today, almost a week later, I'm still getting post after post after post. So this really strikes a chord with people, and the comments are all over the board. We're going to get to some of those in a minute, but I want to continue for just a moment about the health issue involved here. Since 1964 or so, the Surgeon General has been putting warnings, or making cigarette companies more appropriately, put warnings on packages of cigarettes and other tobacco items. We have seen the correlation between smoking and health disease, both cancers, heart disease, lung disease, all of those kind of things. So with that information, do you feel satisfied that this is scientifically a sound bill?
Well, absolutely. I have not found anybody who doesn't believe that there is a link between smoking and cancer. I think everyone has come to that conclusion and understands that to be the fact. And so the question is, what do you do around public policy? For a long time, we allowed smoking in restaurants in those public areas. Well, that has now changed. People now are used to going outside of that restaurant to smoke. But at the same time, we still allow children who have no say in the matter be in a car and actually be smoking in that secondhand smoke through their parents or whatever adult they're with. And all we're trying to say is the same thing as we've done in restaurants and other public spaces. Allow the opportunity and time for the adult to be out of the car, and so we protect the child's health.
All right, I'm going to, as best I can, replicate some of the comments from my social media posts, and they're all objections that I suspect you have heard before. But first, from a smoker. It is a legal product. I am legally using it. What business is it of yours to tell me I can't use it in my car?
Well, again, I'm not saying that somebody can't use it in their car. They can definitely use it in the car. The question is, should they be using it in a car with children present? Now, if there was another adult, they have the ability to say, no, please do this later. I don't want to drive with you. But oftentimes, children don't have a say. And that's why I think you have to have the intervention here to be able to say, protect those children and their health. We tell people to not smoke in other public areas like the workplace, like restaurants. And again, they do that to protect the other people in the area. And what I'm trying to do is protect those children because, again, the health consequences for young children being around secondhand smoke, even with the windows down, is significant and compelling. And that's why we introduced this like other states have across the country.
The smoker or non-smoker that doesn't smoke in a car with minors says, wait a minute. This is government overreach. You're reaching into my car. And the slippery slope conversation comes up. What's next? In my house? I can't smoke in my house. What's next? A radius of 200 feet? The question is, how far can government go in regulating?
Well, again, we've already do some regulation within cars right now. We tell you have to wear seatbelts if you're sitting in the front. With children, we talk about children's seats for safety measures. So again, this is just another safety measure that is very similar to a seatbelt and or to a child safety seat in the back seat of a car. So to me, I don't see that we're doing anything larger than dealing with that confined space, because it is such a small confined space. Obviously, a house is a much bigger place. You're not going to have such a level of impact, but because of the small confined space of a car, you will see those health impacts for those young people. And again, I think most adults are responsible. They are already doing this, and so why not just really use this as a deterrent for those other adults who've not stopped that behavior around kids when they're in their car.
Most of the comments that were on, there were some people that were very pro-smoking, but the vast majority of people who commented were really concerned about the government overreach part of it, what they believe is a government overreach. You say we're already doing some things to provide safety aspects in vehicles. Yet in the last term, when you introduced this same legislation, I don't think you even got a hearing on the bill. Do you think that's changed at all?
Well, again, I'm going to try and attempt to get a hearing again this time. Again, I don't see it as controversial as others do. I could understand if we were looking at somebody's home or something like this, but we're looking at an automobile, which is a small confined unit. We already do things to protect the safety of people in cars, like seatbelts and children's car seats. And so to me, this is just another next step of protection. And so we'll see if I can get a hearing this time. Again, when I talk to parents, they all say that this is common sense and should already be done. But I think we can all see, we drive by families where they're in the car and they're smoking, and you see those children almost trapped back there. And again, I don't think that's good for their health, and that's why other states have implemented this law, and that's why I wanted to have that conversation again here in Michigan.
Do states, not just Michigan, but states in general, have a love-hate relationship with tobacco overall? Because at once, it is a heavily taxed item, particularly in this state, so it is a revenue-generating item. On the other hand, as you point out, the state has gone to great lengths to eliminate it from virtually all public places. Any business that has more than one employee, you can't smoke, all of those things. And in this case, you would eliminate further the use of tobacco. Is that kind of a love-hate relationship?
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of states that really depend on the revenue. To me, that's not what should be guiding this conversation, whether it's here on cars or just in general. It should be the health and welfare of citizens of the state, and that to me is the overarching issue and concern. I understand that we do get revenue from that, and obviously in a tight economy, we always need that revenue, but to me, we should be focused on the health impact, and that's what this bill does.
One last question, and this has nothing to do with your bill, but as we were sitting here talking, I was thinking about the kind of dichotomy of this. There will be on the ballot next November, this is my words, not yours, there will be some type of ballot initiative that will talk about legalizing marijuana, which is another form in many cases of smoking. Is there any separation in what the state has been doing to limit where you can smoke tobacco products, and another effort, which is not generated necessarily by the legislature, though you do have some colleagues in the House that support that? Is that an odd dichotomy that at once the state would like to further limit, or some in the state would like to further limit tobacco use and smoking, and that there may be a push to legalize marijuana?
Well, again, I think there oftentimes will be very similar conversations moving forward. Again, I don't think I'm not trying to ban smoking. I don't think the advocates for marijuana, they want to provide the opportunity to do it. So again, I think the same types of questions will come forward. Even if marijuana is legal, should it be done in the workplace? Should it be done in a car? All those different types of things, even if the person's not driving. I think all those issues will come forward. But again, I do think people are right when they say, smoking is legal. And so to me, I don't want to restrict their right to smoke. But the question is, when it has an impact on somebody else, on the health and safety of somebody else, especially a child who doesn't have a say, I want to be able to be that voice for that child. And I think as you take a look at marijuana and other types of conversations that we'll have further, those same types of questions about where and when will be important questions to be had.
And that's not all that was going on in Lansing. We'll have a final look when we come back to The Point. There was a lot more going on in Lansing this week. The House passed a roads bill. It would rely heavily on cuts in some areas and revenue projections going forward. It's not the final word by any means. The Senate is still working on their plan. And the governor signed a bill about adoptions that says that religious agencies that provide those services can require people to believe in the same way they do. Some say it's about religious freedom. Some say it's discriminatory. We'll be back to talk about that and more next week when you join us to The Point.